Hi, it's Mr. Warren here. Today we're going to have a look at Of Mice and Men, and we're looking at an extract question. We'll be focusing on the shooting of Candy's dog. So our question for today is, how does Steinbeck create mood and atmosphere in this extract? Refer closely to the extract in your answer. So this is a mood and atmosphere question. It's slightly different to your character questions. You need to focus on the mood or the atmosphere created. Now, the difference between mood and atmosphere is essentially that mood is how a character is feeling, and the atmosphere is to do with the surroundings and the setting. So a person might be happy, but there might be a joyous atmosphere within a room. That distinction is really between the character and the place or the setting. So with an extract question, you're being asked to explain how the writer John Steinbeck creates mood and atmosphere. As we've said, there's that distinction between mood and atmosphere. It's important that you clearly distinguish between whether you're talking about mood or whether you're talking about atmosphere. And remember that it's not a character question, so you're not solely focusing on the actions and dialogue of one character. You're looking at the overall mood and atmosphere. It's important you consider the mood and atmosphere within your response. I can't emphasise that enough. You can talk about individual characters, but you must explain how their contributions to the scene affect the overall mood and atmosphere. You can, of course, use your understanding of the rest of the novel to help you, but only quote from the extract and make it clear how it is relevant to what you are discussing. You must use quotations in an extract question. Zoom in on the detail, discuss the structure, the language, the techniques the writer has chosen to use. Explain the effect of the language, techniques and structure you have pointed out. Don't just technique spot. So say why it's important, not just that you've seen a metaphor and that Steinbeck has used a metaphor. Say, he's used a metaphor and I think he's used a metaphor to do this. I think this metaphor creates this type of atmosphere. It's a 10-mark question, as are all of your extract questions. Spend 20 minutes. Don't spend any more time than that because you'll eat into your essay time on your exam. And for a 10-mark question, you should be looking to write 5 to 7 paragraphs using either PEE or an EE structure, so that's point, evidence, explain, or simply evidence, explain. We'll also look at including an expand section, and I'll talk about more as the video goes on. I'll read through the extract for you now. George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Slim said loudly, "One of my lead mules got a bad hoof. Got to get some tar on it." His voice trailed off. It was silent outside. Carson's footsteps died away. The silence came into the room, and the silence lasted. George chuckled. "I bet Lenny's right out there in the barn with his pup. He won't want to come in here no more now he's got a pup," Slim said. "Candy, you can have one of them pups if you want." Candy did not answer. The silence fell on the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, "Anybody like to play a little euchre?" "I'll play out a few with you," said Whip. They took places opposite each other at the table under the light, but George did not shuffle the cards. He rippled the edge of the deck nervously, and the little snapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room, so that he stopped doing it. The silence fell on the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment, and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down toward it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. "It sounds like there was a rat under there," said George. "We ought to set a trap down there." Whip broke out. "What the hell's taking him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't going to get no euchre played this way." George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. This is obviously a very sad scene in the novel, and it's one of the scenes that lots of people remember quite clearly. But you've got to ask yourself what makes it so sad, and that's the point of these extract questions. What makes it a sad scene? Why is it that it's clear that the characters are upset? It's not just that the characters are upset, it's quite clear that lots of the other characters are a little bit unsettled, they're a little bit nervous. They also don't really know how to act around Candy. Candy's obviously upset because his dog's about to die, and about to be, not just die, but to be killed. And not just killed, but killed by another man, not him. They're taking away his right almost to, be the one to shoot his dog if he chose that to be the right thing to do. You can see there are lots of examples of the other men being nervous. The fact that George chuckled, you've probably been in that situation where you're a little bit nervous and you can feel yourself chuckling a little bit, laughing when actually it's inappropriate to laugh. There's also lots of great stuff in this extract talking about the quiet room and sort of how quiet the room is, the fact that it's silent, and placing the latch down gently and things like that so as not to make a noise. The men are really relieved for any break in the silence because it's really uncomfortable. Okay, I won't go into all the detail now, that'll be up for you to do, but what I will do is analyse the first couple of lines for you, show you how I want it set out, and then you can have a go at doing that yourself. So that first line, George followed to the door and shut the door and set the latch gently in its place. Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Straight away, George is creating an atmosphere in the room. By shutting the door, it creates a sense of finality. There's no turning back in this situation. Candy's dog is going to be killed by Carlson. It's also symbolic that it's not Candy shooting his dog, and that it's George shutting the door. Candy has no part in this, he has no power. Remember that title of Mice and Men? In this sense, Candy is one of the mice, not one of the men. He is not taking action, he's not doing anything to stop this, even though he clearly does not want his dog to be shot. But then, as I said already, there's that adverb there, gently. George is aware of Candy's feelings. He knows that it's a really uncomfortable situation. And he knows that letting the latch fall suddenly might cause Candy further upset. He might jump thinking it's the sound of the gun, for example. So it's showing that he's acting cautiously, a bit awkwardly, so as not to upset him any further. Then look at Candy. He's laying there rigidly. He's like a plank of wood on his bed. Won't move. He's sort of paralysed with emotion. He's about to lose his best friend, who, you might argue is one of the only true friendships in the novel. It's one of the only true friendships in the novel. So let's have a go at answering one of these questions. How does Steinbeck create mood and atmosphere in this extract? So firstly, we need to start with our points. A morbid atmosphere is created in this scene when, introduce our evidence, George shut the door. Now we need to explain that. This makes the reader consider the finality of death and the effect that it has on those left behind. So the finality of death, as in once you die, there's nothing that anybody can do about it. Okay, and that's really evident in this extract. Candy is thinking really hard about the finality of death, the finality of never seeing his dog again, or at least never seeing his dog alive again. The use of the adverb gently shows that George is aware of Candy's feelings about inevitable death of his dog and is trying to be as respectful to Candy as possible, even if this will not actually prevent the dog's death. The awkwardness of this action shows how uncomfortable this morbid atmosphere makes all of the characters. So it's just showing that looking and zooming in on that tiny detail of the fact that George gently puts down the latch on the door, he's thinking about how Candy is feeling, but also he's feeling really awkward. He knows that Candy doesn't want his dog to be shot. Maybe it shows you being a little bit respectful, but it just shows how uncomfortable this sort of morbid atmosphere in the room is and how it affects all of the characters. Okay, so we've looked at how George acts in that first little bit. Now we're going to look at Candy. So Candy lay rigidly on his bed, staring at the ceiling. So that adverb rigidly means it's like really stiff, really straight. He's not moving a muscle. So Candy is paralysed with emotion. He's losing his best friend, remember. Look at the next little bit. What word class is being used here? Staring. What type of word is that? Have a think, look it up, try and incorporate that into your answer in a moment. And then I want you to think about these questions. So what's the effect of this word staring? What does it show about how he's feeling? Then think, try to get into his shoes. What would you do if you were in this situation? And then finally, how would you be feeling? Imagine if someone had taken your beloved pet and told you that they're going to go and shoot it because it's a bit old and they feel that that's the best thing to be done for the creature, even if it's not what you want. Okay, whilst you look at those two bits of evidence, I want you to try and slot it in using some of these sentence starters to help you if you need them. So we have a few different sentence starters for your point, for your evidence, your explanation, and your expand as well. Remember, your expand section is where you're going to get lots of your AO2 marks. And also show that you really understand the way that Steinbeck is trying to present the different relationships between the characters for your AO1 marks as well. Right, now just a few final reminders for extract questions in general. It's really important that you explode the question at the start. That's what I did at the very beginning, just picking apart all the different parts of the question and making sure that you're answering what you've actually been asked to answer, not the question that you want. Importantly for this one, it's a mood and atmosphere question, not a character question. Stick to the question focus. If a character says or does something you think is important, make sure that you bring it back to discussing the mood and atmosphere. Then use evidence from the extract. You must use quotations to support your opinions. Short supporting quotations are often a nice way to really use the extract to your advantage. Then zoom in on language, word class, structure and techniques. Show that you know lots of technical English vocabulary and use it to explain what's happening in the extract and show you can appreciate what the writer was trying to do. Then expand on what you found. Don't just say the writer has used a metaphor, talk about the effect of that metaphor and how it affects the mood and atmosphere for this particular question. Then finally, stick to the timings. It's a 20-minute question, it's worth 10 marks. You should be able to get that in 5 to 7 paragraphs. If you go over that time allowance, you're going to deny yourself marks on the higher tariff question because you're going to eat into your time for those further questions. Okay, I hope this has been helpful. Good luck analysing and writing your answer for the rest of this question.